The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains as Abigail Lockhart crumpled to the ground, her blood seeping into the parched earth of Pinos Altos, New Mexico territory. Clara Blackburn screamed, clutching her 3-year-old son to her chest and ducking behind the general store's water trough as bullets splintered the wood around her. It was supposed to be a simple trip for supplies, not a death sentence. Adam Ainsworth watched the scene unfold from his position at the hitching post, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver at his hip. He'd only arrived in town that morning, looking for work and a fresh start after 2 years driving cattle across the frontier. Now he found himself in the middle of yet another fight that wasn't his own. "Stay down," he commanded, lunging toward the woman and child as the gunman turned his attention to the new threat. It was 1872, and Pinos Altos had grown from a simple mining camp to a proper town over the past decade, but justice remained as elusive as gold in a played-out claim. Adam had seen enough death in his 30 years to last several lifetimes, yet something about the terror in this woman's eyes compelled him to act. "Behind you!" Clara screamed as a second assailant emerged from the saloon. Adam spun, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The man fell, clutching his shoulder and cursing. The first gunman hesitated just long enough for Adam to tackle him to the ground. Their bodies collided with the force of a stampede, dust billowing around them as they struggled for control of the weapon. Clara held her sobbing child tighter, watching as the stranger who'd come to their aid subdued the attacker with a decisive blow to the temple. The gunman went limp, and Adam rose to his feet, chest heaving, his tan duster now covered in dirt and blood. "You folks all right?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man who just demonstrated such violence. Clara nodded, still trembling. "Yes, thanks to you, my friend." Her voice caught as she glanced toward Abigail's motionless form. "I'm sorry, madam." Adam removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. There wasn't anything to be done for her. By now, townsfolk had emerged from various storefronts, the sheriff among them. Clara recognized the familiar look of disdain on many faces. She'd grown accustomed to it over the years as an unmarried mother. "What in tarnation happened here, Ainsworth?" the sheriff demanded, having apparently recognized Adam from earlier that day. "These men attacked these ladies without provocation, Sheriff Mills. I intervened." Sheriff Mills surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on Clara and her child with barely concealed judgment before returning to Adam. "You've been in town less than a day and already found trouble." "Seems trouble found me," Adam replied evenly. "Those are Fletcher's men," someone murmured from the gathering crowd. "He won't take kindly to this." Clara felt her blood run cold. Jedediah Fletcher was the wealthiest man in the county, owner of the largest silver mine and most of the businesses in town. He'd made his intentions toward her clear on multiple occasions, and her continued rejections had grown increasingly dangerous to navigate. "They killed Abigail," she said, her voice stronger now despite her fear. "She was just trying to protect us." Sheriff Mills shifted uncomfortably. "Fletcher claims you owe him money, Mrs. Blackburn. Says you're squatting on his property out at the old Carson place." "That land belonged to my husband's family before Fletcher ever set foot in this territory," Clara replied, her green eyes flashing with anger. "He knows that well enough." Adam watched the exchange with interest. There was clearly more to this situation than a random act of violence. "Well," the sheriff said, hooking his thumbs in his belt, "I'll take these men to the jail for now. Fletcher will want to speak to them, I reckon." "And the woman they killed?" Adam asked, his tone challenging. Sheriff Mills had the decency to look ashamed. "I'll send for the undertaker." As the crowd dispersed and the sheriff led the wounded men away, Clara remained by the water trough, her son still clinging to her skirts. Adam approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them further. "My name's Adam Ainsworth," he offered. "I'm truly sorry about your friend." Clara swallowed hard. "Clara Blackburn, and this is Samuel." She gently stroked her son's dark curls. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Ainsworth. Not many would have stepped in." Adam shrugged. "Couldn't very well stand by. You have somewhere safe to go, Mrs. Blackburn." "Seems to me you might need some protection until this business is settled." Clara hesitated, weighing her options. Her isolated homestead suddenly seemed dangerous, but she had nowhere else to turn. Abigail had been her only real friend in town. "We have a small farm about 3 miles east," she said finally, "but I fear Fletcher's men might follow us there." Adam nodded, decision made. "Then I'll accompany you if you'll allow it. I was looking for work anyway." "I can't pay much," Clara warned. "The farm barely sustains us as it is." "Room and board will do for now," Adam replied. "I've bedded down in worse places than a barn." As they prepared to leave town, Clara collected Abigail's body with the undertaker's help, arranging for a simple burial the following day. She couldn't bear to leave her friend to the indignity of a pauper's grave. It depleted nearly all the money she'd brought to purchase supplies, but some debts couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Adam helped Clara into her wagon, then handed Samuel up to her. The boy regarded him with solemn brown eyes, neither accepting nor rejecting this stranger who'd inserted himself into their lives. "It's okay, Samuel," Clara reassured her son. "Mr. Ainsworth is going to help us for a while." Adam mounted his bay gelding and rode alongside as they left Pinos Altos behind. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but Clara barely noticed the heat. Her mind raced with fear, grief, and uncertainty about the future. "Mr. Ainsworth," she said as they traveled, "you should know that Fletcher won't stop. He's a dangerous man with powerful friends. This isn't your fight." Adam's expression remained impassive. "I've crossed paths with men like Fletcher before. They only understand one thing, that they can't always take what they want." Clara wasn't sure what to make of this man. He spoke like someone educated, fought like someone dangerous, yet showed kindness to strangers. In her experience, men were rarely so complicated they wanted something, took it if they could, and moved on. The Carson homestead came into view as they crested a small rise, a modest cabin with a barn and corral, a kitchen garden now wilting in the summer heat, and fields beyond that had seen better days. It wasn't much, but it was everything Clara had left in the world. "It's not what it once was," she apologized as they approached. "My husband Thomas died before Samuel was born, and I haven't been able to work the land properly since." Adam surveyed the property with a practiced eye. "Good water source," he noted, indicating the creek that ran along the eastern boundary. "Decent grazing. Land just needs some attention." They pulled up in front of the cabin, and Clara set about unhitching the horse while Adam carried their meager supplies inside. Samuel trailed behind his mother, still watchful of the stranger. "Mama," he whispered loudly enough for Adam to hear, "is the man staying?" Clara knelt to her son's level. "For a little while, sweetheart. He helped us in town, remember, and we need help with the farm." Samuel considered this information seriously. "Like Papa used to," Clara's face softened with sadness. "Your papa died before you were born, Samuel, you know that. But you told me stories," the boy insisted, "about how he planted corn and fixed the roof." Adam pretended not to listen as he stacked firewood by the small iron stove, but he couldn't help wondering about Clara's situation. Young widows weren't uncommon on the frontier, but something about her demeanor suggested complications beyond the usual hardships. As night fell, Clara prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. They ate in relative silence, the events of the day weighing heavily on them all. Samuel eventually nodded off at the table, and Clara carried him to the small room they shared. When she returned, Adam was cleaning his revolver by the light of a single oil lamp. "You should know," he said without looking up, "that I'm not running from the law. I've got no outstanding warrants or blood feuds that might bring trouble to your doorstep apart from what happened today." Clara sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I appreciate that, though it seems I've brought trouble enough of my own." "This Fletcher," Adam said, reassembling his weapon with practiced ease. "What does he want with your land?" Clara sighed. "Water rights, primarily." "His mining operation needs more than the town can provide. My property controls access to the best part of the creek." She hesitated. "And he's made it clear he'd like more than just the land." Adam nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. "How long has your husband been gone?" A shadow crossed Clara's face. 4 years this winter." Adam glanced toward the room where Samuel slept. The boy couldn't be more than 3. Clara met his gaze directly. "You've noticed the timing, I see. Samuel was born after Thomas died. It's not my place to judge, Mrs. Blackburn." "Perhaps not," she agreed, "but everyone else does. Thomas and I were married for 2 years with no children. After he died, I was alone for many months before." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "I made a mistake with a passing stranger who promised much and delivered nothing. When he learned I was with child, he vanished. The good people of Pinos Altos have never let me forget my shame." Adam returned his revolver to its holster. "Folks are quick to condemn what they don't understand. And you understand." "I understand that life is rarely simple," he replied. "And that a child deserves better than to bear the burden of others' judgments." Clara studied him in the dim light. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Ainsworth." "Call me Adam," he said. "And what did you expect? Someone rougher, less?" She searched for the word. "Thoughtful." Adam smiled slightly. "I've been called many things, Mrs. Blackburn, but thoughtful might be a first." "Clara," she corrected. "If you're to be Adam, then I'm Clara." They fell silent, the weight of the day settling around them like dust after a storm. Tomorrow would bring Abigail's burial and unknown challenges from Fletcher. For tonight, however, they had reached an understanding, tentative, fragile, but real. "I'll bed down in the barn," Adam said, rising from the table. "Lock the door behind me," Clara nodded. "I always do." As Adam crossed the yard to the barn, he surveyed the land in the moonlight. He hadn't planned to stay in Pinos Altos more than a night or two before continuing west, perhaps to California or Oregon. Now he found himself entangled in a local dispute with potentially deadly consequences, all because he couldn't ignore a woman and child in danger. He settled into the hayloft, using his saddle as a pillow, a familiar discomfort from years on the trail. As he drifted toward sleep, Adam pondered the mystery of Clara Blackburn. She carried herself with dignity despite her circumstances, defending her home and son with a fierce determination he admired. And there was something in her eyes, a wounded resilience that spoke of someone who had faced the worst life could offer and continued standing. Tomorrow would bring what it would. For tonight, he had made a choice, and he would see where it led. Dawn broke with the promise of merciless heat. Adam rose early, checking the perimeter of the property before Clara and Samuel stirred. The land showed signs of previous prosperity, well-built fences now sagging, irrigation ditches partially collapsed, fields that had once yielded abundant crops now struggling against encroaching weeds. He was repairing a broken corral post when Clara emerged from the cabin, her hair tied back in a simple braid, wearing a faded work dress that had seen better days. "You're up early," she observed, carrying a bucket toward the well. "Force of habit," Adam replied, hammering a nail into place. "Cattle drives don't allow for sleeping past sunrise." Clara nodded, drawing water for the day's needs. "We should leave for town by mid-morning. Abigail's burial is at noon." Adam set down his hammer. "I've been thinking about that. It might be safer if you and Samuel stayed here while I attend on your behalf." Clara's expression hardened. "Abigail died trying to protect us. I won't dishonor her memory by hiding." "It's not hiding, it's strategy," Adam argued. "Fletcher will expect you there. It's the perfect opportunity for him to make another move." "All the more reason for me to face him directly," Clara countered. "I won't live in fear, Mr. Ainsworth. I've spent too many years doing that already." Adam recognized the stubborn set of her jaw and knew further argument would be futile. "At least allow me to handle the driving, and keep Samuel between us at all times." Clara conceded this point with a nod. "I'd be grateful for that." After a breakfast of cornmeal mush, they prepared for the journey to town. Samuel was unusually quiet, sensing the somber mood. Clara dressed him in his best clothes, which weren't much, but clean and mended with care. "Are we saying goodbye to Miss Abigail?" he asked as Clara combed his unruly curls. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara replied gently. "She's gone to heaven, but we're going to make sure she's properly laid to rest." Samuel considered this. "Like the bird we found last spring," Clara smiled sadly. "Something like that." Adam watched their interaction, struck by the boy's solemnity. Children on the frontier grew up quickly, their innocence tempered by the harsh realities of life and death. They set out for Pinos Altos with Adam driving the wagon, his revolver within easy reach. Clara sat beside him, Samuel on her lap, her own shotgun resting beneath the seat. The journey was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts as the landscape shimmered with heat. The burial was a small affair, just Clara, Samuel, and Adam, along with the preacher and gravedigger. A few townsfolk observed from a distance, but none approached. Abigail Jenkins had been a spinster with no family, her only crime befriending a woman the town had deemed unworthy of respect. As the preacher spoke the final words, Clara placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the simple coffin. Tears streamed down her face, but she made no sound. Samuel clutched his mother's skirts, not fully understanding but feeling her grief nonetheless. Adam stood slightly apart, his hat in his hands, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He'd half expected Fletcher or his men to make an appearance, but the cemetery remained peaceful. Their vigilance continued as they made their way back through town to purchase the supplies Clara had originally come for the previous day. The general store owner was cool but professional, taking Clara's money without meeting her eyes. "Folks seem determined to shun you," Adam observed quietly as they loaded flour and coffee into the wagon. "I'm used to it," Clara replied, though the tightness around her mouth suggested otherwise. "After Thomas died and I found myself in trouble, the minister's wife suggested I move away, start fresh somewhere no one knew my situation." "Why didn't you?" Clara stroked Samuel's head as he played with a small wooden toy Adam had whittled for him that morning. "This land is all Samuel will have of his family heritage. I won't surrender it because of small minds and cruel hearts." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of 3 men on horseback. Adam recognized the sheriff among them, along with a well-dressed man whose bearing suggested authority. The third rider was one of the men from yesterday's confrontation, his arm in a sling. "That's Fletcher," Clara whispered, her body tensing. Jedediah Fletcher was in his 50s, with silver hair and cold eyes. His clothes were expensive but practical, a man who'd made his fortune through determination and ruthlessness rather than inheritance. "Mrs. Blackburn," Fletcher said, tipping his hat with mocking courtesy. "I see you've acquired protection. How enterprising of you." Adam stepped forward, positioning himself between Clara and the newcomers. "Mr. Fletcher, I presume." Fletcher studied Adam with the calculating gaze of a predator assessing a potential threat. "And you must be the drifter who interfered with my business yesterday." "Ainsworth, is it?" "Your business seemed to involve shooting unarmed women," Adam replied evenly. "Where I come from, that's called murder." Fletcher's expression darkened momentarily before he forced a smile. "A regrettable misunderstanding. My men were simply trying to deliver a message regarding Mrs. Blackburn's outstanding debts." "I owe you nothing," Clara said, her voice steady despite her fear. "The land is mine, legally and morally." "The law is open to interpretation, my dear," Fletcher replied. "Especially when certain improprieties might call one's character into question." Adam felt Clara stiffen beside him. "Say your piece and be done with it, Fletcher." Fletcher smiled, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. "Very well. Mrs. Blackburn, I'm prepared to be generous. $500 for your property, more than fair given its current state of disrepair. You could start fresh somewhere else, away from painful memories." "Not interested," Clara replied immediately. "The land stays in my family." Fletcher's smile faded. "I admire your spirit, but you're being foolish. A woman alone can't manage that place, especially with a child to raise. And now that your friend Miss Jenkins is gone, you're truly without allies in town." "She's not alone," Adam said quietly. Fletcher turned his attention back to Adam. "You're temporary, Cowboy, a drifter passing through. When you move on and she'll be vulnerable again." "Perhaps," Adam agreed. "But by then she'll have clear title and documentation that not even you can challenge. I happen to know something about land law, Mr. Fletcher." This seemed to give Fletcher pause. He studied Adam more carefully. "You're not just some saddle tramp, are you?" Adam met his gaze without flinching. "Everyone has a past, Mr. Fletcher. Mine taught me to recognize when someone's trying to steal what isn't theirs." The standoff continued for several tense seconds before Fletcher laughed a sharp, humorless sound. "Well, this has become more interesting." He turned to Clara. "My offer stands for 1 week, Mrs. Blackburn. After that, circumstances may become less favorable." With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, his companions following close behind. "He's not giving up," Clara said, watching them go. "That was just the opening move." Adam nodded. "I never expected him to. Men like that don't surrender easily." They finished loading their supplies in silence, both aware that every eye in town was on them. As they prepared to depart, the sheriff approached again, this time alone. "Mrs. Blackburn, a word of advice," he said, his voice low. "Fletcher's not a man to cross. Whatever this stranger's promised you, it won't be enough against Fletcher's influence." "Are you speaking as the law, Sheriff Mills, or as Fletcher's errand boy?" Adam asked. Mills flushed with anger. "Watch yourself, Ainsworth. Your type comes and goes, but I'm here for the duration." "And what type is that?" Adam challenged. "The type that brings trouble and leaves others to deal with the consequences," Mills replied. He tipped his hat to Clara. "Good day, Mrs. Blackburn." As they drove out of town, Clara's shoulders finally relaxed slightly. "Thank you for standing with me." Adam kept his eyes on the road. "Fletcher was right about one thing: you do need clear title documentation." "Do you have the original deed?" Clara nodded. "Thomas's father was meticulous about paperwork. It's in a lockbox at the cabin, along with the marriage certificate and Samuel's birth record." "Good," Adam said. "We'll review them tonight. I want to understand exactly what legal ground we're standing on." Clara gave him a curious look. "You mentioned knowing about land law. Were you a lawyer before becoming a cowboy?" Adam's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Not exactly." Let's just say I've had cause to learn about property rights over the years." They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. Samuel had fallen asleep against his mother's chest, the events of the day having exhausted him. "Why are you really helping us?" Clara asked suddenly. "You could have ridden out this morning, found work elsewhere without all this complication." Adam considered the question seriously. "I've spent most of my adult life drifting from place to place, taking work where I could find it, never staying long enough to form attachments." He glanced at her. "Maybe I'm tired of running from what matters." "And what matters to you, Adam Ainsworth?" "Justice," he said after a moment. "Protecting those who can't protect themselves. The things I thought I was fighting for during the war before I realized how complicated the world really is." Clara nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The war changed many men." "Not always for the better," Adam acknowledged, "but it taught me to recognize what's worth fighting for." They arrived back at the homestead as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. After unloading the supplies and tending to the horses, Clara prepared a simple supper while Adam continued his work on the corral. That evening, after Samuel was asleep, Clara brought out the lockbox containing the farm's documents. Adam spread them on the table, studying them carefully by lamplight. "The deed is solid," he said finally. "Your father-in-law purchased this land directly from the government in 1853, well before Fletcher arrived in the territory. The water rights are explicitly included." Clara looked relieved. "So legally he has no claim. Not to the land itself, no, but that doesn't mean he won't try other methods." Adam tapped the marriage certificate. "This is dated June 1865, and Samuel's birth record shows February 1869. He looked up at Clara. "That's a significant gap." Clara's face flushed. "As I told you, Thomas died before Samuel was born." "I'm not questioning your word," Adam assured her. "I'm trying to understand what Fletcher might use against you. You said Thomas died 4 years ago. That would be 1868. Clara nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "January 1868. Pneumonia took him within a week." "And Samuel was born in February 1869, Adam noted. Which means he was conceived after Thomas died," Clara finished, her voice barely audible, "with a man passing through town who called himself Charles Dalton. He claimed to be a surveyor for the railroad. It was a moment of weakness after more than a year of loneliness." She looked up, defiance in her eyes. "I've never hidden the truth from anyone who asked directly, but I don't owe explanations to those who only wish to judge." Adam closed the documents and returned them to the lockbox. "Fletcher will try to use this against you. He'll suggest that without a husband and with your history, you're not fit to maintain the property." "It's been 4 years," Clara said, anger edging her voice. "I've kept this farm running alone, raised my son, met every challenge. What more must I do to prove myself worthy of basic respect?" Adam reached across the table and briefly covered her hand with his the first time he had touched her intentionally. "You have nothing to prove, Clara. Not to Fletcher, not to the town, not to me." The simple gesture and his words broke something in her. Clara's shoulders began to shake, years of pent-up emotion finally finding release. Adam sat awkwardly, uncertain whether to offer further comfort or allow her privacy in her grief. "I'm sorry," she said finally, wiping her eyes. "I don't normally. It's been a difficult few days." "No need to apologize," Adam replied. "You've shown remarkable strength. Everyone needs to unbuckle occasionally." Clara managed a watery smile at his phrasing. "Is that cowboy wisdom?" "Just human truth," he said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start making this place more defensible." Over the next several days, Adam and Clara worked side by side to repair the farm's infrastructure. He mended fences, reinforced the barn door, and installed new locks on the cabin windows. Clara cleared irrigation ditches and tended to the struggling garden, coaxing new life from the soil. Samuel trailed after them both, eager to help in his childish way. Adam found himself watching Clara when she wasn't looking, the determined set of her jaw as she tackled difficult tasks, the gentle patience she showed with Samuel, the rare smile that transformed her face when something pleased her. He realized she was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps only 25 or 26, though life had etched worry lines around her eyes. For her part, Clara observed Adam with growing curiosity. He worked with the efficiency of someone accustomed to physical labor, yet he spoke like an educated man. He treated Samuel with respect rather than condescension, answering the boy's endless questions thoughtfully. And sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. On the fourth day, as they shared lunch in the shade of an old cottonwood tree, Samuel approached Adam with unusual seriousness. "Mr. Adam," he said, using the name he'd adopted for their visitor, "are you going to be my new papa?" Clara nearly choked on her water. "Samuel, that's not an appropriate question." Adam remained calm. "Why do you ask that, Samuel?" The boy shrugged. "Tommy Porter in town got a new papa when his old one died, and you fix things like Mama said my papa used to do." Adam glanced at Clara, whose face had flushed crimson, before addressing Samuel. "I'm just helping your mama for now, but I think you're doing fine with just her." "She's pretty special, isn't she?" Samuel nodded solemnly. "She's the best mama, but sometimes she's sad when she thinks I'm sleeping." Clara's embarrassment gave way to tenderness. "Oh, Samuel, everyone gets sad sometimes. It doesn't mean I'm not happy with you." "I know," the boy replied with surprising wisdom, "but Mr. Adam makes you smile more." With that, he wandered off to investigate a beetle crawling across the ground, leaving the adults in awkward silence. "Children," Clara said finally, shaking her head. "They notice everything and understand nothing." Adam wasn't so sure about the latter part but chose not to argue. "He's a good boy. You've done well with him." "Thank you," Clara replied, still not meeting his eyes. "He's all I have." The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Adam was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his revolver. "Get Samuel inside," he instructed, his voice shifting from conversational to commanding in an instant. "Take the shotgun and stay away from the windows." Clara didn't question him, gathering Samuel and hurrying to the cabin. Adam positioned himself near the corral, partially concealed but with a clear view of the approaching riders. There were 3 of them. Fletcher wasn't among them, but Adam recognized the man he'd wounded in town. They slowed as they approached the property, making no attempt at stealth. "Ainsworth," called the one in front. "Just want to talk." "You're on private property," Adam responded, not moving from his position of cover. "State your business." The men stopped their horses about 50 yards from the house. "Mr. Fletcher sent us with a message for Mrs. Blackburn," said the leader. "He's raised his offer to $700. Says it's his final courtesy before taking other measures." "Mrs. Blackburn's answer hasn't changed," Adam replied. "The land isn't for sale." The man spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Fletcher figured you'd say that. That's why he wanted us to deliver this as well." He held up an official-looking document. "Notice from the territorial court. Hearing scheduled for next Monday regarding the rightful ownership of this property." Adam's jaw tightened. "On what grounds?" "Something about improper transfer after the death of Thomas Blackburn," the man said with a smirk. "Seems there might be questions about the widow's moral fitness to inherit." Adam felt cold fury rising within him. "Leave the notice and get off this land." The man rode forward slowly, hand clearly visible as he extended the document. Adam approached cautiously, taking the paper without lowering his guard. 1 week, Ainsworth, the man said. Fletcher always gets what he wants one way or another. As they rode away, Adam studied the court notice. It was genuine. Fletcher had convinced a judge to review Clara's inheritance of the property, citing moral turpitude and violation of territorial inheritance statutes. It was a flimsy case legally, but with Fletcher's influence, it could be dangerous. Clara emerged from the cabin after the riders had disappeared, Samuel clutching her skirts. What did they want? Adam handed her the notice. Fletcher's trying a different approach. Clara read quickly, her face paling. He's challenging my right to inherit because Samuel was born after Thomas died. How did he even know when the baby was conceived? Small towns have long memories, Adam said grimly. And Fletcher has likely been building his case against you for some time. Clara sank onto the porch step, the paper trembling in her hands. How can he do this? Thomas left a will naming me his sole heir. Is the will recorded with the territorial court? Clara frowned. I don't know. Thomas's father handled all the legal matters before he passed, and then Thomas. We never discussed such things. Adam sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. We need to go to Santa Fe. The territorial records would be there, and we need a lawyer familiar with inheritance law. Santa Fe is 3 days' journey, Clara said, and I can't afford a lawyer. I can, Adam replied simply. When she looked at him in surprise, he added, I've saved most of my wages over the years, not much to spend money on during cattle drives. Clara shook her head. I can't accept that, Adam. You've already done too much. Consider it an investment in justice, he said. Fletcher needs to learn he can't simply take whatever he wants. Clara studied him, trying to understand this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to an unspoken prayer. Why do you care so much about this fight? It's not your land, not your problem. Adam was silent for a moment, watching Samuel, who had returned to playing with his wooden toys on the porch. When I was a boy, he finally said, my family had a small farm in Missouri, nothing fancy, but it was ours. After my father died in a farming accident, a wealthy neighbor tried to force my mother to sell. When she refused, he manipulated the county records, claiming our mortgage had defaulted. We lost everything. His voice hardened. I was 14, too young to fight back effectively. I swore I'd never stand by and watch that happen to someone else if I could help it. Clara's expression softened with understanding. What happened to your mother? She died 2 years later, Adam said, the old pain evident in his voice. Working as a laundress in St. Louis, the conditions. They weren't good. Clara impulsively reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry, Adam. He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared grief and resilience. We'll leave for Santa Fe tomorrow, Adam said, gently disengaging his hand. Pack only what's necessary for you and Samuel. We'll need to travel light and fast. Clara nodded, her decision made. I'll be ready at first light. The journey to Santa Fe was arduous, particularly with a young child. They traveled in Clara's wagon, Adam driving while she kept Samuel entertained. The boy was initially excited by the adventure, but as hours stretched into days, he grew restless and cranky. They camped by the trail each night, Adam maintaining a vigilant watch. On the second evening, as Samuel finally drifted to sleep beneath a makeshift tent of blankets, Clara joined Adam by the small campfire. He's finally asleep, she said, warming her hands against the night chill. I think the motion of the wagon is the only thing that kept him from complete rebellion today. Adam smiled. He's holding up well for his age. Most men I know would be complaining twice as much. Clara laughed softly. True enough. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think we'll find what we need in Santa Fe?" "I hope so," Adam replied honestly. "At the very least, we should be able to locate a copy of Thomas's will and determine if it was properly registered." Clara nodded, staring into the flames. "I've never been to Santa Fe. Thomas spoke of taking me someday, but—" She trailed off, lost in memories. "Tell me about him," Adam said. "Thomas, I mean." Clara looked surprised by the request. "He was kind," she said after a moment. "Quiet but strong in his convictions. His father was one of the original settlers in Pinos Altos, came for the gold rush in '60. Thomas was more interested in farming than mining. Said gold fever made men crazy, but growing things kept them sane. Sounds like a wise man." "He was," Clara agreed. "We had a good marriage, if brief." "He would have been a wonderful father." She glanced toward the tent where Samuel slept. "Sometimes I feel guilty that Samuel will never know him." "And Samuel's natural father?" Adam asked carefully. "You mentioned he left when he learned you were expecting." Clara's expression hardened. "Charles Dalton, if that was even his real name. He stayed in Pinos Altos for nearly a month, charming everyone with tales of the railroad's coming prosperity. I was vulnerable. Thomas had been gone almost a year and the loneliness was crushing." She sighed. "When I told him about the baby, he claimed he was already married with children back east. Said he'd send money, but of course, he never did." Adam nodded, understanding more clearly why Clara was so fiercely protective of her independence. "Men can be dishonorable." "Some men," Clara corrected. "Not all." She looked at him directly. "You've proven that." Adam shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I've just done what anyone should do." "But they don't, do they?" Clara pressed. "That's why what you're doing matters so much." She reached out hesitantly and touched his arm. "Thank you, Adam. Regardless of what happens in Santa Fe, I won't forget your kindness." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Adam felt himself drawn to her courage, her determination, her quiet strength. But he was acutely aware of the power imbalance in their situation. She was vulnerable, dependent on his help. To express any personal interest now would be taking advantage. He gently moved back, breaking the contact. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Clara withdrew her hand, a flicker of something disappointment. Relief crossing her face. "Of course. Good night, Adam." "Good night, Clara." As she retired to the tent with Samuel, Adam remained by the fire, pondering the complications of their situation. He'd come to Pinos Altos seeking nothing more than temporary work before moving on, as he always did. Now he found himself deeply invested in a legal battle against the most powerful man in the county, developing feelings for a woman whose life was already filled with challenges, and growing attached to a child who wasn't his own. It was precisely the kind of entanglement he'd avoided for years. Yet for the first time since the war, Adam felt as though he was exactly where he needed to be. They reached Santa Fe late on the third day, the territorial capital bustling with activity even as evening approached. Adam secured rooms at a modest hotel, separate accommodations for propriety's sake, though the expense strained his resources more than he let Clara know. The following morning, they made their way to the territorial government offices. Samuel was wide-eyed at the sights and sounds of the city, having never been anywhere larger than Pinos Altos. "Remember what I told you," Clara reminded her son as they approached the imposing building. "You must be on your best behavior today." "Yes, Mama," Samuel replied, attempting to smooth his travel-rumpled clothes. The clerk at the records office was initially dismissive of their inquiry, particularly when he learned they had come from a remote mining town. Adam's quiet insistence, accompanied by a small financial incentive, eventually gained them access to the property records for Grant County. Hours of searching through dusty ledgers yielded both good and bad news. Thomas Blackburn's will was indeed on file, clearly stating his intention to leave all worldly possessions to his beloved wife, Clara. However, there was also a more recent filing, a petition challenging the inheritance on grounds of moral character, submitted by Jedediah Fletcher just 3 weeks earlier. "He's been planning this for some time," Adam observed grimly. "The hearing notice wasn't a spontaneous reaction to our resistance." Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. "What do we do now?" "We need legal representation," Adam decided. "Someone familiar with territorial law who isn't afraid of Fletcher's influence." Finding such a lawyer proved challenging. Several attorneys declined to take their case after learning Fletcher was the opposing party. By late afternoon, Clara was losing hope. "Perhaps we should return home," she suggested wearily as they left the Fifth Law Office. "Face Fletcher directly at the hearing. The will is clear, after all." "One more try," Adam insisted, consulting a list of names he'd obtained from a sympathetic clerk. "This James Harrington is supposed to be both skilled and stubborn, exactly what we need." Harrington's office was smaller than the others they'd visited, tucked above a printing shop on a side street. The man himself was younger than expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with spectacles and a thoughtful demeanor. "Fletcher, you say?" he remarked after hearing their story. "I've crossed paths with him before when I represented some miners in a dispute over claim jumping. Nasty business." He studied the documents they'd brought. "But this is particularly underhanded even for him." "Will you help us?" Clara asked directly. Harrington removed his spectacles, polishing them absently. "It won't be easy. Fletcher has significant influence with Judge Thornton, who's presiding over your case. And these moral character claims, while legally dubious, can be persuasive in territorial courts." "But the will is clear," Adam pointed out. "Thomas Blackburn wanted his wife to inherit regardless of any subsequent events." "True," Harrington acknowledged, "and that will be our primary argument, but we'll need to address the character allegations directly as well." He looked at Clara kindly but directly. "Mrs. Blackburn, I must ask, is there anything about your situation that Fletcher could use against you beyond what you've already disclosed?" Clara squared her shoulders. "No, I've never hidden the truth about Samuel's parentage. I've lived quietly, worked hard, and raised my son as best I could." Harrington nodded. "Good. Transparency will be our ally." He closed the file decisively. "I'll take your case. My fee is $50 with an additional $100 if we win." It was a substantial sum, but less than Adam had feared. They agreed to the terms, arranging to meet again the following day to prepare their strategy. As they left the office, Clara's relief was palpable. "Do you think we have a chance?" "More than we did this morning," Adam replied honestly. "Harrington seems capable, and more importantly, he's not afraid of Fletcher." They spent 2 more days in Santa Fe, gathering additional documents and preparing for the hearing. When not meeting with Harrington, they explored the city, showing Samuel the sights and momentarily setting aside their worries. These brief interludes of normalcy, watching Samuel's delight at seeing a military parade, sharing meals that didn't require Clara's preparation, walking together through the plaza, as the sunset created an illusion of family that Adam found increasingly hard to dismiss. On their final evening in Santa Fe, after Samuel had fallen asleep in the adjoining room of Clara's accommodations, they sat together, reviewing Harrington's strategy one last time. "He seems confident," Clara said, arranging the papers into neat stacks. "But I can't help worrying about what Fletcher might do if we win. He's not a man who accepts defeat graciously. One battle at a time, Adam advised. If we secure your legal right to the property, at least he can't take it through the courts. Whatever comes after, we'll handle it. Clara looked up at his use of we. You speak as though you'll remain in Pinos Altos indefinitely. Adam hesitated. He'd been avoiding this conversation, uncertain of his own intentions. I've stayed in one place before, he said finally. It wouldn't be impossible. But is it what you want? Clara pressed. You told me yourself you're accustomed to drifting, taking work where you find it. Pinos Altos has little to offer a man with your skills. Perhaps what Pinos Altos offers isn't about work, Adam replied carefully. The air between them seemed to still. Clara set down the papers she'd been organizing, her hands slightly unsteady. Adam, she began, I need to be clear about something. I'm grateful for your help more than I can express. But if you're considering staying because you feel obligated or sorry for us, that's not it, he interrupted, meeting her eyes directly. Not at all. Then what? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Adam struggled to articulate feelings he'd been denying even to himself. I've spent years moving from place to place, never allowing myself to form attachments. It seemed safer that way. After the war, after losing my mother and our land, I didn't want to care about anything that could be taken away again. Clara listened silently, her eyes never leaving his face. But since meeting you and Samuel, he continued, I've started to wonder if I've been running from the wrong things, if perhaps what I've feared losing is precisely what gives life meaning in the first place. Adam, Clara said again, her voice thick with emotion. I can't ask you to take on my burdens, my battles. Samuel is my responsibility, not yours. What if I want that responsibility? He asked simply. What if I've come to care for both of you in ways I didn't expect? Clara rose from her chair, turning toward the window that overlooked the darkened street. It's been such a short time, she said, though the objection sounded weak even to her own ears. You barely know us. Adam remained seated, giving her space. Sometimes a short time is enough to recognize what matters. I'm not asking for promises, Clara, just possibility. She turned back to face him, conflict evident in her expression. It wouldn't be fair to you. The town will never fully accept Samuel or me. They'll always see us as tainted. Let them, Adam said firmly. Their judgment means nothing to me. Clara studied him for a long moment, as if searching for doubt or deception. Finding none, she said softly, when Thomas died, I thought I'd never again feel anything but loneliness. Then Samuel came, and I had purpose, but still emptiness where companionship should be. She took a tentative step toward him. I never expected someone like you to appear in our lives. Adam stood, closing the distance between them but still maintaining a respectful space. Life rarely gives us what we expect. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead. Clara's smile was tentative but genuine. When did cowboys become philosophers? Around the same time widows became legal warriors, I suspect, he replied, returning her smile. The moment hung between them possibility, potential, the fragile beginning of something neither had sought but both now recognized. Adam wanted to kiss her, to confirm that this connection between them was real. But he held back, aware that timing mattered. They had a battle to win first. We should get some rest, Clara said eventually. Tomorrow will be a long day. Adam nodded, reluctantly accepting that the moment had passed. Good night, Clara. Good night, Adam. They returned to Pinos Altos the following day, Harrington traveling separately to avoid association before the hearing. The journey felt shorter somehow, charged with new awareness between them. Samuel, perceptive as always, sensed the change, watching them with curious eyes but asking no questions. The farm appeared undisturbed in their absence. though Adam insisted on checking every building before allowing Clara and Samuel inside. That night, he slept in the cabin rather than the barn, making a pallet near the door while Clara and Samuel occupied the single bedroom. It was a small change but significant an acknowledgement that they were now facing their challenges together. The day of the hearing dawned clear and hot. Clara dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had once been vibrant but was now faded with washing. She tied Samuel's hair with a ribbon and polished his shoes, determined they would present themselves with dignity. Adam wore the only suit he owned, purchased years ago for occasions that required more formality than cowboy attire allowed. As they prepared to leave, he took Clara's hands in his. "Whatever happens today," he said, "remember that you've done nothing wrong. Hold your head high." Clara squeezed his hands gratefully. "With you beside me, I can." The territorial court was housed in Pinos Altos' largest building, which also served as the town hall. By the time they arrived, a crowd had gathered Fletcher's influence, ensuring this would be a public spectacle rather than a private legal matter. Harrington met them at the entrance, his confident demeanor reassuring. "Remember," he advised Clara, "answer only what is asked, directly and honestly. Let me handle the legal arguments." Inside, the room was arranged with a judge's bench at the front, tables for the opposing parties, and rows of seating for spectators. Fletcher was already present, conferring with his attorney, a slick-looking man from Silver City, known for representing mining interests. Judge Thornton entered, a stern-faced man in his 60s with a reputation for strict interpretation of territorial statutes. The proceedings began with Fletcher's attorney presenting their case. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is a simple matter of moral fitness for inheritance. While Thomas Blackburn's will did indeed name his wife as beneficiary, it was created under the assumption that Mrs. Blackburn would uphold certain standards of behavior becoming a widow. Her subsequent indiscretions, which resulted in the birth of an illegitimate child, clearly violate the moral conditions implicit in inheritance law." Adam felt Clara stiffen beside him, but was proud to see her maintain her composure. Harrington rose to respond. "Your Honor, there are no moral conditions implicit in New Mexico Territory inheritance law. Mr. Blackburn's will is unambiguous and legally binding. Mrs. Blackburn's personal life following her husband's death has no bearing on her legal right to inherit property that was explicitly left to her." The arguments continued for nearly 2 hours, becoming increasingly technical as both attorneys cited precedents and statutes. Throughout it all, Clara sat straight-backed and dignified, despite the whispers and stares from the spectators. Finally, Judge Thornton called Clara to testify. She approached the front of the room with measured steps, took the oath, and faced the judge directly. "Mrs. Blackburn," Fletcher's attorney began, "is it true that your son Samuel was born in February 1869, more than a year after your husband's death?" "Yes," Clara replied clearly. "And the father of this child was not Thomas Blackburn?" "No, he was not." A murmur ran through the crowd. The attorney looked pleased with himself. "Were you married to this other man?" "No," Clara said, her voice unwavering. "So you admit to engaging in immoral relations while still presenting yourself as the respectable widow of Thomas Blackburn?" Harrington objected immediately. "Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness and making moral judgments that have no legal relevance." "Sustained," Judge Thornton ruled, surprising many in the room. "Confine your questions to legally relevant matters, Counselor." Fletcher's attorney adjusted his approach. "Mrs. Blackburn, since your husband's death, have you maintained the property in a manner consistent with its previous management?" "I've done my best," Clara replied honestly. "There have been challenges as a woman alone, but the land remains productive." "Yet you've fallen behind on tax payments twice in 4 years," the attorney noted, producing records, "suggesting you're unable to manage the financial responsibilities of property ownership." "Those taxes were paid in full, if not always on time," Clara countered. "The property has never been in jeopardy of tax foreclosure." The questioning continued, with Fletcher's attorney attempting to portray Clara as financially irresponsible and morally compromised. Through it all, she maintained her dignity, answering truthfully but refusing to appear ashamed. When Harrington's turn came, he established Clara's consistent residence on the property, her efforts to maintain and improve it, and the clear legal documentation of her inheritance. He then asked a question that changed the tone of the proceedings. "Mrs. Blackburn, why is this land important to you? Why not accept Mr. Fletcher's offer, which would allow you to start fresh elsewhere?" Clara took a deep breath. "This land represents my husband's legacy and his family's hard work. It's the only inheritance my son will ever have a place with history and meaning. More importantly, it's our home. Mr. Fletcher wants it for water rights and profit, not because he values what it truly represents." When Clara returned to her seat, Adam squeezed her hand briefly in support. The attorneys presented their closing arguments, and Judge Thornton announced he would deliver his ruling after a brief recess. The wait was excruciating. They stood in the shade outside the building, avoiding the curious stares of townsfolk. Fletcher remained inside, apparently confident in his influence over the judge. "You were magnificent," Adam told Clara quietly. She gave him a tired smile. "I simply told the truth. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing we can do." When court reconvened, Judge Thornton's expression gave nothing away. He shuffled papers for a moment before addressing the room. "This case presents interesting questions about the intersection of moral expectations and legal rights," he began. "While I personally may have opinions about Mrs. Blackburn's choices following her husband's death, my duty is to interpret the law, not enforce social mores." Adam felt hope rising as the judge continued. "Thomas Blackburn's will is clear and legally executed. There are no conditions within it regarding the behavior of his widow, nor does territorial law provide for retroactive moral clauses in inheritance. Furthermore, Mrs. Blackburn has maintained continuous residence on the property and kept tax obligations current, if occasionally delayed." Fletcher's face darkened as the judge's direction became clear. "Therefore, it is the finding of this court that Clara Blackburn is the legal owner of the property in question, with all rights and privileges thereof. Mr. Fletcher's petition is denied." A mixture of gasps and murmurs filled the room. Clara's hand found Adam's, clutching it tightly. Harrington turned to them with a satisfied nod. "Court is adjourned," Judge Thornton announced, bringing his gavel down with finality. As they gathered their belongings, Fletcher approached, his expression cold with fury. "This isn't over," he said quietly for their ears alone. "A piece of paper won't protect you." Adam stepped forward, placing himself between Fletcher and Clara. "The law has spoken, Fletcher. If anything happens to Mrs. Blackburn, her property, or her son, every authority from here to Santa Fe will know exactly who's responsible." Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "You won't stay forever, Cowboy. Men like you never do." "Maybe I'm not the man you think I am," Adam replied evenly. Fletcher stalked away without another word, his attorney hurrying behind him. Harrington approached, offering congratulations and a warning. "This is a significant victory," he said, "but Adam's right to be cautious. Fletcher isn't known for accepting defeat graciously. I suggest you register a copy of today's ruling with both the county and territorial offices immediately." They followed his advice, spending the remainder of the day securing official copies of the judgment. By the time they were ready to return to the farm, evening was approaching. The town had largely emptied, most citizens returning to their homes or heading to the saloons. "It feels strange," Clara commented as they loaded Samuel into the wagon. "To have fought so hard and won, yet still feel uneasy." "Victory doesn't always feel the way we expect," Adam replied. "Especially when the fight was forced upon you." The journey back to the farm was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Samuel, exhausted by the day's events, fell asleep against his mother's shoulder. As they approached the property, Adam noticed something odd about the horizon. "Clara," he said sharply, "look." Against the darkening sky, a plume of smoke rose from the direction of their homestead. Clara's grip on Samuel tightened. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't dare." But as they crested the final rise, the devastating truth became clear. The cabin was engulfed in flames, the fire spreading to the nearby barn. Several horsemen could be seen riding away in the distance. Adam urged the horses to a gallop, but by the time they reached the property, the destruction was well advanced. He leapt from the wagon, rushing toward the barn where their livestock was stabled. "Stay back," he shouted to Clara. "Keep Samuel away from the smoke." Working frantically, he managed to free the horses and their milk cow, leading them to safety. The buildings, however, were beyond saving. They could only watch as the flames consumed what had taken generations to build. Clara stood with Samuel clutched to her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. As Adam returned to her side, covered in soot and singed in places, she spoke with a voice that was surprisingly steady. "He took everything." Adam gently placed his hands on her shoulders. "Not everything, Clara. You still have the land, you still have Samuel." He paused, then added more softly, "And you still have me if you want." She looked up at him, her expression shifting from despair to something more complex. "Fletcher was right about one thing, men like you don't stay. Once the danger passes, once the excitement fades, you'll feel the pull of the open road again." "I can't promise I'll never feel restless," Adam admitted, "but I can promise that if I do, I'll fight it. Some things are worth putting down roots for." He gestured toward Samuel, who had fallen back asleep despite the chaos. "Some people are worth staying for." Clara studied his face in the flickering firelight, searching for truth. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. "We have nothing now, no home, barely any possessions. I can't ask you to share that burden." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Adam took a deep breath. "Clara, I have no flowery words or grand proposals. I'm a simple man who spent too long avoiding what matters. But I know this: I care for you and Samuel more than I thought possible after so short a time. And I want to build something with you, if you'll have me." Clara was silent for a long moment, tears still flowing. Finally she spoke, her voice breaking with emotion. "I have a child from another man," she said, the words both confession and challenge. Adam's response came without hesitation. "Then I have 2 reasons to stay." Something shifted in Clara's expression, hope breaking through despair like the first rays of dawn. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling slightly. "We would have to start completely over." "I've done it before," Adam said. "We both have." Clara glanced at the burning ruins of her home, then back to Adam. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I want you to stay. I want us to build something together." In the midst of destruction, with the future uncertain and danger still present, Adam pulled Clara and Samuel gently into his embrace. It wasn't the beginning either of them had imagined, but it was theirs, hard-won and honest. They spent that night in the wagon, parked a safe distance from the smoldering remains of the buildings. In the morning, They would face the enormous task of rebuilding, but for now they took comfort in their survival and newfound commitment to each other. As dawn broke over the horizon, Adam was already awake, planning their next steps. Fletcher would expect them to flee, to abandon the property after such devastating loss. Their continued presence would be both a statement and a risk. Clara joined him as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the charred ruins. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice stronger than the night before. "First, we document this," Adam decided. "Then we report it to the sheriff, not that I expect justice, but to establish an official record. After that," he surveyed the land, mentally mapping what they would need. "After that, we rebuild." "Better than before." Clara slipped her hand into his. "Together." "Together," he agreed, sealing the promise with a gentle kiss. Their first, but far from their last. In the days that followed, news of the fire spread throughout Pinos Altos and beyond. To Fletcher's evident surprise, Clara and Adam not only remained on the property but began immediate efforts to rebuild. They constructed a temporary shelter using salvaged materials and canvas from the wagon, more tent than house, but sufficient for immediate needs. Word of Fletcher's likely involvement in the arson reached the territorial governor, who dispatched a ranger to investigate. While proof remained elusive, the scrutiny forced Fletcher to maintain his distance, at least temporarily. More surprisingly, some townsfolk who had previously shunned Clara began to offer assistance. A few brought building materials, others helped with labor. Adam suspected their change of heart stemmed less from genuine acceptance and more from their discomfort with Fletcher's tactics. But he welcomed the help regardless. By winter, they had constructed a small but sturdy cabin, one room for now, with plans for expansion in the spring. Adam had repaired the well, rebuilt the corral, and secured their livestock in a temporary shelter that would serve until a proper barn could be raised. On a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the distant mountains, Adam and Clara stood hand in hand before the preacher who had ridden out to perform a simple ceremony. Samuel stood between them, solemn in his understanding that this man who had saved them was now officially becoming his father. "Do you, Adam Ainsworth, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. Adam looked at Clara, her face flushed with cold and happiness, her eyes clear and trusting. "I do," he said, the simple words carrying the weight of all they had endured together. "And do you, Clara Blackburn, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Clara replied, her voice steady and sure. As they exchanged their vows, Samuel tugged at Adam's sleeve. When Adam bent down, the boy whispered loudly enough for all to hear, "Does this mean I call you Papa now?" Adam smiled, his heart full. "If you'd like to, son." "I would like that," Samuel declared with the certainty only a child could muster. The ceremony concluded with a cheer from the small gathering of those who had helped them rebuild. Whatever their initial reasons for assistance, these people had witnessed the couple's determination and come to respect it. While full acceptance might take years, this was a beginning. As their guests departed and evening approached, Adam, Clara, and Samuel stood outside their modest new home. The land stretched before them, challenging but full of possibility. With Fletcher's influence diminished by outside scrutiny, they could focus on creating the future they wanted rather than defending against threats. "It's not the life I imagined," Clara admitted, watching Samuel play in the yard, "but it's become more than I dared hope for." Adam wrapped his arm around her waist. "We'll build it day by day, make it something worth passing on to Samuel and perhaps—" He hesitated, then continued, "perhaps to brothers or sisters for him someday." Clara turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I would like that very much." As darkness fell, They entered their cabin together, not the grand home Thomas Blackburn had envisioned for his family, but a place built with determination and hope. The land remained, the legacy continued, and a new family had formed from the most unexpected circumstances. In years to come, the Ainsworth farm would grow and prosper. Adam would never entirely lose his restlessness, but he found satisfaction in improving their land and teaching Samuel the skills a young man needed. Clara's garden would become renowned throughout the county, and eventually Samuel would gain the siblings Adam had mentioned, first a brother, then twin sisters who inherited their mother's determination and their father's sense of justice. Fletcher would make one final attempt to claim the property through legal channels, only to find himself countersued by Adam, whose knowledge of land law had expanded considerably during their struggles. The resulting settlement would include water rights that benefited both properties, a compromise neither had initially wanted, but both could live with. The town of Pinos Altos would slowly change its attitude toward Clara as new residents arrived and old grudges faded. Samuel would grow up knowing both the challenge of facing others' judgment and the strength that came from a family united against adversity. And on quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Adam and Clara would sometimes sit on their porch, watching the stars emerge over land that had seen both tragedy and triumph. They would remember how close they had come to losing everything, and how much they had gained through courage, perseverance, and an unexpected love that began with the simple words, "Then I have 2 reasons to stay."